Good morning, everybody. It's nice to see you all. It's nice to be up here today. As service was starting, I got a text from my partner. Apparently, I took her car key with me today when I drove up here. Oh my. So pray for me. I'm guessing that New York Hebrew is going to kick in. So a couple things before I dive into my talk this morning. One is several of you have asked me after services about the quotes that I use and can you have them and what have you. So what I want you to know is that the talk that I'm giving today is based on my blog, and I didn't post this because I'm giving the talk. So if you go to my Facebook page sometime later today or tomorrow, the blog will be there with all the quotes. It'll also be on my center's website as well. And then also, for anybody that would be interested, is in 2 weeks, I haven't taught in years since the pandemic, but I'm going to be starting to teach a class. It's called The Planets Within, and it's a spiritual approach to the starry world. And it'll be on Wednesday starting January 18th. So if you go to the Hilltop Center, information on those things are there. And I asked Marjorie if it was okay for me to toot my own horn, so there I am. So the universal voice. What is that universal voice speaking to all of us? So I've been sort of considering that. And I've been contemplating these words from Joseph Campbell, who says this: myth is what we call other people's religion, right? My teacher used to say that a religion is a cult backed by an army. But myth is what we call other people's religion. But then he goes on to say this: every religion is true in one way or another. It is true when it is understood metaphorically. But when it gets stuck in its own metaphors, interpreting them as facts, then you run into real trouble. So isn't this interesting? So this is kind of where my thought is going. And it's not all that unique a thought. But isn't it interesting that one of the oldest institutions, one of the things that holds us together since time immemorial, influencing culture, developing a sense of identity as to who we are collectively, is also, and by the way, this institution called religion says that it is a path, whatever that would be, a path to the divine. But isn't it interesting that this very same institutional thought creates separation, alienation? I'm reminded of the words of James Joyce, where he talks about a person who lives within close proximity to themselves. So isn't it interesting that the very same thing can create suffering as well as joy? And then I started thinking about this a little bit more. And I thought, it all comes down to this. It comes down to a proprietary interpretation of a story. I'm right, you're not. This is it, that's not. And so many of us have had that effect. Many people feel alienated or wounded by their experiences in one spiritual path or another. Some people perpetrate those wounds. But here's the kicker for me, is whether a person has been wounded or whether a person has done wounding, it all comes down to one thing: a story. That's it. story and our interpretation of how that story is supposed to be. You know, the founder of our movement, Dr. Holmes, talks about how each one of us can become a revealer of truth, provided that we live in close proximity to that divine presence within. And so that's been kind of my thought. So, you know, where does this boil down to? I think it's this. It's lack of curiosity. Lack of curiosity. You know, to live our life fully expressed, to live our life open and undefended, is to live our life curiously. When we're not curious, we are judgmental. And when we are judgmental, we are vulnerable. You know, the beauty of curiosity is that it is open and expansive. Judgmentalism is closed and grasping. One is trying to hang on, and one is trying to express itself. And so for me then, you know, to live authentically is to live curiously. And I think the thing that causes the greatest stumbling block is certainty. Paul Tillich, who was a great public theologian of the 50s and 60s, used to say this. He says that the opposite of faith is not doubt. The opposite of faith is certainty, which is a defense against doubt. You know, and that all of us should, in our own development of our own spiritual path, in our own personal faith, have some room for doubt, for curiosity. It's certainly not going to offend God. It allows us to grow and expand ourselves. Abraham Heschel, who's one of my special spiritual heroes, says this. He says, "There are hardly proofs for the existence of God. There are hardly proofs for the existence of God, but there are witnesses." Don't you love that? It's kind of hard to prove the existence of the non-existence of God. Frankly, it's kind of the wrong question to be asking. Actually, it's boring. But there are witnesses. Witnesses who have encountered the beauty or the sublime. Witnesses who have had this miraculous, life-changing experience. Witnesses who are storytellers. Witnesses who, in that encounter, live a more patient, more loving, a more kind life. Witnesses who can express their encounter only through art, music, dance, metaphor, or silence. And perhaps you've met one of these witnesses. There was something about this person's inner glow. Or perhaps you yourself are a storyteller and a witness to this great experience, this encounter that brings us to the divine itself. There's something about when we encounter the divine, our lives are changed, but it's not because of the encounter. It's because it's not the event. God can't be contained in an event, but it's what we allow it to do, how it shifts, and how it begins to change us. Howard Thurman, in one of his beautiful poems, "This is the Season of Promise," says this: "Listen to the long stillness. New life is stirring. New dreams are on the wing. New hopes are being ready. God is at work. God is at work. I want to offer that thought as perhaps a spiritual tool to use. God is at work. In fact, for a moment here, quietly to yourself, think about something going on in your life that is growing, expanding, has your curiosity. And oh, by the way, let me hit a pause button here for a second. If you're having an issue with the word God, well, chances are you're probably stuck in a story. But secondly, something that Emma Curtis Hopkins says is this. She says, our good is our God. So if you're having a thing with God, use what your good is. If joy is your good, then joy is at work. If love is your good, then love is at work. Health, strength, prosperity, whatever it is. But just breathe that in for a moment. Think about that circumstance in your life where there's growth, expansion, amazement, wonder, surprise, awe. God is at work. God is at work. How that changes our perspective on everything. Now, let's up it up just a bit. Think of something or someone who's challenging you. That person who cut you off. That lecture that I'm going to get today. Whatever is going on. And say to yourself, even there, God is at work. God is at work. Because if we let ourselves be curious, how the divine is always luring us into a fuller, more authentic expression of ourselves, how God is always calling us into a greater experience, then we can encompass everything around us. God is at work. God is at work. Not in some predetermined, it was meant to be kind of way, but to the wisdom and the love and the compassion that's always, always, always available to us at any breathing moment, at any second. God is at work. Because then I think we become sensitive to what's afoot. How even in the appearance of things, which again, Emma Curtis Hopkins cautions us, do not be deceived by the appearance of things. What's going on underneath? So, in my Holy Scripture, J.R. Tolkien, my Lord and Savior, in Lord of the Rings, there's this wonderful section of the stories, and it's in the third book for those keeping score, and it's the Riders of Rohan, who are these great warriors on horses. They're being called to the aid of Gondor, and they're having to rush to this great mythic battle that's going to happen. And to save time, these very odd, curious mountain people lead them through these hidden valleys and passages to speed them on their way, to get them to their appointed time. And as they're getting there, the Riders of Rohan, Theoden, thanks them all. And then there's this line there, and I just love this, where he says, Gan Purigan, that's the character, Gan Purigan, squatted down and touched the earth with his horny brow in a token of farewell. Then he got up as if to depart. But suddenly he stood looking up like some startled woodland animal snuffing a strange air. A light came into his eyes. Wind is changing, he cried. And with that, in a twinkling as it seemed, he and his fellows vanished into the glooms, never to be seen by the Riders of Rohan again. The wind is changing. The wind is changing. And if we can pay attention to that universal voice, that perception, the wind is changing. If we can listen, this is what the earth is speaking now. if we will pay attention to the starry world, this is what's written in the heavens. The wind is changing. God is at work. Something's up. Do not be deceived by the appearance of things. Wind is changing. Thomas Merton writes this shortly before his death. Thomas Merton was a Christian mystic. He was a Trappist monk, and very interestingly lived a life of seclusion, and yet was controversial that his death is somewhat dubious. And in 1968, shortly before he died, he wrote these words: "We can no longer rely on being supported by structures that may be destroyed at any moment. They are good, and they should help us, and we should do the best we can with them. But they may be taken away, and then what do you do next? What do you do next when the external things that you thought were there seem taken away?" This is how quickly I think we become disillusioned, and sometimes in new thought, we feel that unless there's a demonstration, then God isn't working. But maybe it's something more. And to me, this is, I think, the thing that I want to offer you the most. And it's a quote from Jürgen Moltmann, where he says this: "But the ultimate reason for our hope is not to be found at all in what we wished for and wait for. The ultimate reason is that we are wanted and wished for and waited for. That you are wanted and wished for and waited for. And that the truest thing about you, the thing that is most true about each and every person in this room, is that you are the beloved. And oh, by the way, so is your neighbor. You are wanted, wished for, and waited for." Let me offer that to you as a mantra for the week. Say it quietly to yourself. I am wanted. I am wished for. I am waited for. Because something begins to happen when our attention is on that we are the beloved, not because of anything that we have done or haven't done, not because of where we were born, who we were born with or to, and what particular flavor of religion we adhere to. All those external things fall away. And what is left? That universal voice is speaking to us. It is the truth that is spoken in the Christian Bible and the Hebrew Bible. It is the very essence of the Bhagavad Gita and the Holy Quran. It is the Tao. You are wanted, wished for, and waited for. And to let that breathe in and let that literally anchor itself into the very DNA of who we are. And let me offer you this thought from the 12th century Rhineland mystic, Meister Eckhart. He says this: "If you desire to know the immeasurable sweetness of God, give up every hope of deserving it, since it's beyond you. If you desire to know the immeasurable sweetness of God, give up every hope of deserving it, because it's beyond you. Instead, concentrate on making your soul open to this gift. And when you do, this God cannot resist filling you to the point of great overflowing, which once filled flows out to everything around you until it returns to the source. These are the witnesses. These are the storytellers. This is what is being asked of each and every one of us. God is at work. You are wanted, wished for, and waited for. Thank you for your kind attention.